Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. Always appreciative of all the support. NFL offseason in full swing. NFL Combine kind of the talk of the town right now, I guess, depending on when you watch this video. Maybe it has already come and gone by then. The Packers, like every team this offseason, you have areas of need. Some are more drastic than others. Certain things to focus in on. If you take the pulse of the Packers, at least with the fan base, and you ask, like, hey, what are the areas of need? Like, what do the Packers need to address this offseason? Most would bring up edge rusher, getting a pass rusher, wide receiver. Young group has shown promise. No one has emerged as a top wide receiver. Christian Watson's going to miss a significant portion of the 2025 season recovering from a torn ACL. We already know that. And then I would say cornerback. It sounds like Jair Alexander's gone. A lot of people are enamored and very happy with Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, but Eric Stokes is probably gone too. You need depth in that room. You might need a top cornerback, deciding on how Goody and company and how Matt LaFleur and Jeff Hafley and the rest of the coaching staff views Keyshawn Nixon. I think Valentine's a solid number 2, but cornerback, wide receiver, edge rusher would be the 3 spots that I think most would probably hone in on. And I was kind of looking over things, and when you factor in performance, contract situations, like looming fifth-year options specifically for one guy in this position group, the interior of the defensive line, I think you could almost put it right up there with where things stand now with the roster. And again, that factors in who's a free agent, looming options, performance from 2024. To me, you could almost lump in the interior of the defensive line right there with wide receiver, cornerback, and the need for an edge rusher. I believe most would probably put edge rusher 1, but we're not going to get into the semantics of that. But no one's really talking about the interior of the defensive line for Green Bay. And to me, I think whether it's free agency or the draft, I would doubt a trade, but who knows? Green Bay will invest in some form or fashion. They almost have to for depth purposes at a minimum on the interior of the defensive line. And if you just look around at what Green Bay is dealing with, well, there's multiple names to sift through. TJ Slayton. TJ Slayton has been a fixture in Green Bay for a few years now. He's an unrestricted free agent. There's no guarantee. There's no lock that Slayton will be back in the mix in 2025 and in the foreseeable future for the Packers. Do you want TJ Slayton back? Well, he's started each and every game the past 2 seasons. He has shown durability. He has shown he is reliable. You can't predict injuries and you can't completely avoid them, but durability, reliability, they are real things in the NFL, and TJ Slayton has been available for the Packers, and he has started every game each of the last 2 seasons. He's a guy that doesn't make like a ton of impact, splash plays, game-altering plays. TJ Slayton, if you ask most, they would say he's good at clogging up run lanes. He's a big body that an offensive line has to keep tabs on. They have to pay attention to him. He'll draw a good amount of double teams, which can free up someone else on the defensive front. But if you want splash plays, the once every 3 weeks making a game-altering strip sack, like TJ Slayton hasn't really been that guy for Green Bay, but you know what you're going to get. There's no like roller coaster ride with Slayton. But now he's an unrestricted free agent. There's no guarantees back. And again, you're talking about a guy who started every game the past 2 seasons. It was interesting to note that in 2023, which was Joe Barry's last season as defensive coordinator, Slayton played 56% of the snaps defensively. That dropped to 39% this past season, which of course was the first year Jeff Hafley was at the controls as defensive coordinator. And that's not some, small drop. You go from playing over half of the snaps defensively, 56% in 2023, to 39% in 2024. And again, the kicker within all of this is that Slayton, if you miss time due to injury, it's counted as 0 snaps played. So your numbers are going to fluctuate heavily whether you're in or out of the lineup. I just told you the last 2 years, Slayton has started every single game for the Packers. So to go from 56% in 2023 to 39% in 2024, it's fair to say he sort of, at times, fell out of favor. And when you look at the rest of the interior of that defensive line, you've got Kenny Clark, who's a mainstay. You have Devontae Wyatt, who the Packers used a first-round pick on in 2022. Carl Brooks slid inside once in a while. And Hafley got somewhat exotic at times with his looks, and it wasn't, consistently throughout the duration of a game, but there were looks defensively where Green Bay out front would have Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley Enagbari, Preston Smith before he was traded as like the front four for Green Bay. And, as the season developed, we saw looks where, it wasn't a surprise to see Van Ness, Gary, Bretton Cox out there at the same time, or Enagbari shuffled in for one of those three. And so all that factors in, but it doesn't make up for what was a significant drop in playing time for Slayton. And for a guy who is typically available, doesn't have a huge injury history that you have to worry about, he perhaps could want a change in scenery and an opportunity to be on the field more with his next destination. I don't know that would be guaranteed in Green Bay. I don't know how you would tell a guy who saw his percentage of snaps played drop 17% that, it'll go back up in 2025 if you re-sign with us. Well, why did it go down in 2024, right? Green Bay just had other mouths to feed. Probably wanted to see what you had in Devontae Wyatt, used a premium draft pick on him. Kenny Clark's the veteran of the group. You're not going to slide him out of the equation too much. And so for TJ Slayton, unrestricted free agent, it shouldn't break the bank to bring him back, but it's just not, there's no certainty that he returns to Green Bay. Like, I haven't seen any stories where it's like, oh yeah, the Packers really want Slayton back and Slayton really wants to return to Green Bay. It might be true, but we haven't seen reports like that surface. And so again, when you talk about areas of need, things Green Bay has to address this offseason, everyone's wide receiver, cornerback, edge rusher, well, a guy who has started every game the last 2 years for you as an unrestricted free agent shouldn't cost a whole hell of a lot of money to bring back, but maybe Green Bay wants to try to find someone, whether it's in the draft or perhaps free agency, that makes more of an impact, because Slayton's impact doesn't show up in a box score necessarily. Again, he clogs running lanes, he draws double teams, he helps free up other guys on that defensive front. Maybe Green Bay wants someone on the interior that's, causing havoc in a different way, that can get to the quarterback more instead of just clogging a run lane. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with TJ Slayton. Kenny Clark, I mentioned his name. We all love us some Kenny Clark. He's been a model of consistency in Green Bay since they took him in the first round out of UCLA in 2016. Last season, though, 2024, if it didn't, you're not running over to the panic button, but if it didn't put up some antennas, if it didn't raise some alarms, I think you're blindfolded. Watch Kenny Clark in 2024 and then go put the tape on from even 2021, 2022. Slow down a little bit. At least it appeared that way. Every athletes are, they go through rough stretches. If you really want to expand it out, you could maybe make a case that, hey, athletes they can have a rough year, a rough season, and then bounce back. And Kenny Clark has been so damn good, so damn reliable, so damn consistent for the Packers. It would not surprise me if after a slow, sort of down 2024 season, if he rose back up to the occasion in 2025. But again, alarms have to be up a little bit with what you saw this past year from the veteran of that group on the interior of the defensive line. Kenny Clark last year had a career low 1 sack. Now, he's not a premier edge rusher. He's not on the end of the defensive line. He's on the interior of it. He's not a guy that's going to give you 11 to 12, 13 sacks. That's not in his job description. It's not his responsibility to do so. But a career low 1 sack, you need a little bit more. Kenny Clark last year tied a career low with 6 quarterback pressures, quarterback hurries. Again, you need more from the veteran of the group, and we're not going to go pocket diving, but this is a guy in Kenny Clark who just got his 3rd contract with the Packers last summer on a 3-year extension, and it was well-deserved, but you need more. The worry comes from this isn't a guy who is 25 turning 26, and you're like, oh, maybe it was just a down year. This is a guy who turns 30 in October, and I've brought up that age before. Once guys turn 30 in the NFL at a lot of positions, not all of them, but at a lot of them, it's when front offices and teams, organizations, franchise, they start to shy away from players. Clark will be right in the middle of a 3-year extension that was signed last summer. Again, well-deserved, but you need more from Kenny Clark. And like TJ Slayton, when I said there's no certainty he's back in Green Bay, he's an unrestricted free agent. There is no certainty. You'd like to look at Kenny Clark's track record and his resume and suggest he'll be fine, but there are indicators and things going against him, such as his age, turning 30 in October, coming off a year, career low 1 sack, 6 quarterback hurries. Need more. And so it's not a guarantee that he's just going to rediscover that or get back to that in 2025. We'd like to think so. Again, everyone loves Kenny Clark. Everyone can have down years. But we're talking about a guy who just didn't have that same burst that we've become accustomed to seeing, again, since he was drafted all the way back in 2016. And so you go back to it. Wide receiver, cornerback, edge rusher. Those are the 3 that everyone's pointing at for Green Bay. Look at the interior of the defensive line, too. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciate all the support. Last name to bring up, too, Devontae Wyatt. Wyatt's he's a main fixture, a key cog, a big part of the operation. However you want to phrase it. I mean, Green Bay used a first-round pick on Wyatt back in 2022, the former Georgia Bulldog, with the expectation that the word I come back to with Devontae Wyatt that has been lacking is consistency. The Packers took him in the first round out of 2022, expecting him to be a consistent force. Really, when they drafted Wyatt, it was, here is Kenny Clark's tag team partner, right? Because you're talking about a draft pick from 3 years ago. Kenny Clark would have been 26, 27 years old at the time, playing at a really, really good level. But if you remember the discourse around Kenny Clark for quite a few years was, this dude is so damn good for the Packers. Everyone realizes it, including the opponent, and so they're double-teaming the hell out of Kenny Clark. He needs a tag team partner. Wyatt was selected in the first round out of Georgia in 2022 to be that tag team partner for Kenny Clark. And if you go back and you look and you scan over articles and quotes from the coaching staff and the belief that a lot of analysts and reporters had, Devontae Wyatt was, I don't even want to say a name. Devontae Wyatt was like the name, or one or two of them. That when Jeff Hafley was hired and you knew the defense was switching schematically, many pointed at Wyatt as a guy who would be a huge beneficiary to the defensive switch and Hafley coming into the fold for Green Bay to take over the reins as the defensive coordinator. And if you just buckle it down to the first month of last season, Devontae Wyatt was as advertised. He was as good as it gets. He was the guy that you saw on tape coming out of Georgia that just absolutely dominated, chewed up, and spit out the interior of an offensive line. He was oozing with confidence in Hafley's scheme the first month of the season. In 3.5 games, because he got hurt in the fourth against Minnesota, in 3.5 games to start the season, Devontae Wyatt had 3 sacks and 6 tackles for loss. He was a menace to society, more so a menace to whoever the opposition was for Green Bay in those first few weeks, whether it was Philadelphia, Indianapolis, Tennessee, and then the game against Minnesota. Suffered an ankle injury against the Vikings in that loss at Lambeau Field. And it truly brought everything to a halt. I remember the dialogue that was going on the first few weeks of the season. It was, oh my gosh, Devontae Wyatt has figured it out. Maybe he hasn't even figured it out. Maybe this scheme just fits him to a T, but he has arrived. And that word I always use with him, consistency. We saw it throughout those first 3.5, just say 4 games before he suffered that ankle injury against the Vikings. He went on to miss 3 games. He came back, and then he reverted back to that guy where we would see it in flashes. We would see it in moments, but you wouldn't see it consistently. Again, I'm hammering that word home with Wyatt. The ankle injury, It didn't slow things down. It brought it to a screeching halt with the former Georgia product. Now he has a fifth-year option on the table this offseason. Goody and company, they have big decisions to make. Goody, we should note, at his end-of-the-year presser back in January, praised Wyatt, praised Quay Walker, the inside linebacker, who was the other first-round pick. Green Bay had 2 first-round picks in 2022. They took Quay Walker first, and then they took Devontae Wyatt second. Both late first-round picks. Both have fifth-year options. Goody said back in January he thought Wyatt had his best season, which it's hard to argue even with the injury, that it would be any other season. And he thought Quay Walker had his biggest season. At the Combine, earlier this week, again, depending on when you watch this video, Goody spoke as a general manager who he said directly they want Quay Walker to be around, not, for 1 or 2 more years. They want Quay Walker to be around long-term. He's part of the long-term plans for Green Bay's defense. Is Wyatt a part of that too? Do you pick up his fifth-year option, or are those numbers, do they not make sense? Does it make more sense to discuss a contract extension with Wyatt? Do you let him play out this 2025 campaign? Don't pick up the fifth-year option, risk losing him in free agency, or if he, struggles to show consistency again, you let him walk. If he deals with injuries, do you let him walk? There's so much uncertainty with this fifth-year option looming over the heads of Green Bay's front office and the brain trust and Devontae Wyatt, that when you talk, I look at this secondary for Green Bay, and I look at Xavier McKinney, Evan Williams at safety, hopefully Javon Bullard too, and you're like, those are pieces you want in place long-term. Those are pieces that should be in place long-term. McKinney signed a long-term deal last offseason. Evan Williams, Bullard are just in year 2 this upcoming season of their rookie deals. You look at corner. You want Carrington Valentine long-term. Keyshawn Nixon to be around for the long haul. At linebacker, Goody said it about Quay Walker. Whether you or I disagree, they want Quay Walker around. Edger and Cooper should be a answer long-term. The interior of the defensive line, Slayton might not be because he's a free agent. Wyatt might not be because of the injuries, the lack of consistency, and the fifth-year option that may or may not be picked up. Kenny Clark's going to be 30 in October. How much gas is left in that tank? And so you look at 3 different situations, and all 3 are different. One's an unrestricted free agent. One's a veteran who's turning 30 in October, who's coming off arguably his quietest year in the NFL, and he's been in the league all with the Packers since 2016. And then you have a third who, I don't think out of the group anyone's denying Devontae Wyatt has the most untapped potential. He has the highest ceiling of the group on the interior of that defensive line. But he hasn't been able to just put it all together, and it looked like he was doing that the first month of the season before that unfortunate ankle injury. And so you have all these questions, and they're different ones. For Kenny Clark, it's can he rebound in 2025, or is, age and all these snaps and the durability? Kenny Clark's missed 1 game, I think it is, 1 or 2 games in the last 4 seasons. Like, he is as available as it gets. Is that starting to catch up to him? I don't know. Is Slayton even going to be back with the Packers? We don't know. Are they going to pick up the fifth-year option with Wyatt? Can he stay healthy? Can he be the guy we saw the first month of the season going forward? We don't know. There's so many question marks. That's why I look at this, and you can have wide receiver, you can have cornerback, you can have edge rusher, all in your group as far as, hey, these areas need to be addressed. Whether it's in-house with an extension for Wyatt, which I don't know if that would happen this offseason, whether it's re-inking Slayton new deal or addressing it in free agency in the draft, interior of the defensive line will be a big topic, at least internally, for the Packers and their front office. Got to figure it out. And it's weird because it's a group like that helped contribute. I think the Packers had they were 8th in the NFL in sacks, but it just didn't seem like it. They had 2 monster games against Seattle and Tennessee that helped heavily contribute to the sack totals. But yeah, the inside of that defensive line, there's a lot of questions that haven't been resolved yet that will in the next couple of months for Green Bay. So we'll see. No time to panic. Just got to find solutions, whether it's on the roster or somewhere else. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. Always appreciate all the support. click the subscribe button. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. Please click the subscribe button. Always appreciative of everyone supporting the channel as we build it up. We'll see you next time.